don't know if you expected me today. I've done my best to stay off the stage. You know, I get asked quite a bit by media, by people, what has changed in the 4 years since Netroots, since yearly coast in Las Vegas. And lots of things have changed. But, you know, for one, we were really sort of rabble-rousing rebels, and now we're kind of in charge. So we were teenagers, now we're the man. But personally, it was always very awkward and weird for me at that Vegas convention to see my name over everything. I never really considered myself a leader in a traditional sense. I know most of you have heard this from me, but it was what I really enjoy and what I really strive to do is kind of build the tools and a culture to enable new leaders to emerge and to take that mantle of leadership. I'm too lazy to be a leader. And it's great to me to go from having my name on everything and doing the keynote address, as much as I enjoyed it, and I'm being on half the panels and probably introducing 3/4 of the speakers that year, to almost getting out of doing anything this year. Almost. But there's one person that was at this convention, one or two people, that would have dragged me up here, and one of those is tonight's keynote address speaker, Darcy Burner. How many of you gave to Darcy Burner? Yeah, she was pretty awesome. Darcy, I don't know if you know this, but she was born in Alaska. So she's not the only famous woman from that northern state. And she tells me that she never saw Russia. But I don't believe her. That's the liberal media talking, because I know what Sarah Palin tells me, and she speaks the truth. I don't know if you heard about the death panels. And she moved to Nebraska. So I mean, Alaska, Nebraska, I mean, you know, she should have been really, really red. But she wasn't, obviously. And she was always very civic-minded. I don't know if you know this. I didn't know this. But when she was 18 years old, she was the Civil Air Patrol National Cadet of the Year. You're more impressed about that than I was. I thought it was pretty endearing, actually. And she tried to explain to me what it was. And it had something to do with planes flying, patrol over the coast. And she's in Nebraska, so I'm not quite sure what that has to do with the coastline. But she won out of thousands. So from very on, clearly she had leadership skills. She went on to Harvard. She got a BA in computer science and economics. That means she's one of us. A nerd. A geek. A geek is a nice way to say that. In 2000, she started to work for Microsoft. That was a step back. Should have gone to Cupertino. But it was a job. And it was 2006. Actually, in 2003, I think it was, she first became politically active, in large part because of the Netroots, because of what she saw happening to her country. Her first overt political action, other than voting, was to give $50 to Howard Dean. Again, like a lot of us. 2006, she took the, I think, very courageous step of running against an entrenched incumbent, Dave Reichert, in her Seattle area district. Even though she got very little respect from the establishment, she got a lot of it from people like us. She came within 2.9% of ousting an incumbent. You have to think back to 2006. This was a time when, unless you were a top-tier candidate, unless you were somebody who could raise the millions of dollars, if you were sort of a lobbyist or an attorney, you know, the party took you seriously. She wasn't taken seriously, yet she was able to accomplish almost the impossible. She almost did it. So she came back in 2008 and tried again, and she was neck and neck to the final week until the Seattle Times did a hit piece claiming that she had lied about her Harvard degree. It was bullshit. But in politics, it didn't matter. It was enough that she lost another heartbreaker, one of the most difficult races, I think, for me personally in 2008. After all the victories, and we had so many, that was one of the hardest losses for me. But all of you people who donated to Darcy, you didn't waste your money. You invested in one of those leaders. This is what we as a movement are doing. We're finding these leaders. And she didn't get out of the game. She didn't go back to Seattle and go back to work for Microsoft, thank God. Instead, she now heads the Progressive Caucus Policy Foundation. It's a group, the C3, or the C4, I think C3, of the Progressive Caucus in Congress. And now we all know that the Progressive Caucus is a shadow of the influence and power of the Blue Dogs. Now Darcy is working with them and with progressives outside of Congress to create a progressive caucus that can be as effective and as active and as influential as the Blue Dogs, so we can push back against those bad Democrats and let the good Democrats shine. So I am so proud and honored to introduce Darcy Burner.
Okay, now I want to cry. I want to start by thanking all of you for your friendship and support over the last several years. You have no idea how much it has meant to me, not just from a professional perspective, but also, frankly, from a personal one. It has made a great deal of difference. When I started to run, and by the way, I think it would be a really good idea if more women ran. On your tables, there are these little cards where you can nominate women to run. And my friend Sam Bennett is running the Women's Campaign Forum that's running that program. If you would all be so kind as to pick one woman you know who should run for office and fill those cards out, you could be the seed of a difference that changes the nature of our elected representation. So please do that. I used to have to make stump speeches all of the time, as is not that surprising for somebody who ran for Congress, and I haven't actually gotten up to give a speech in a few months, so it's a little bit, I was actually kind of nervous about this. But I was thinking about how I used to open my stump speeches, and I used to open them by talking about why I decided to run for Congress. It's not a particularly intuitive thing necessarily for someone who is a group program manager at Microsoft to make the leap into running for Congress. But there were two things that happened to me in early 2003 that really changed my perspective on how I needed to be spending my time. The first thing that happened was a very good thing. In January of 2003, my son Henry was born, and I did what I think all new parents do. I said, okay, one, what was I thinking? Two, how do I give this child the kind of life I want him to have? What school district should we live in? Do we have to eat all organic fruits and vegetables? Is a golden retriever, in fact, a requirement when you have a small boy? The answer to that is yes, in case any of you are wondering. But 2 months later, when Henry was 2 months old, my brother Jason was one of the people who marched into Iraq with the initial invading force. And I have this really clear memory of holding Henry while I was packing a care package for Jay and realizing that there was no set of choices that I could make as an individual parent that was going to be sufficient for me to give my son the kind of life I wanted him to have if we didn't dramatically change the direction of our country.